Well, first of all, I thought this was going to be so much fun because we work together and you're always in one box and I'm in the other box in, Washington and New York. And we'd get time to spend time together. And then I realized to do this, I actually have to read the book. So...
Can I just say just one thing? First of all, it's so wonderful to be here at the 92nd Street Y. You guys are so great always, and the people here are amazing. But also, one of the fun things about being a journalist, especially being an anchor, is being able to talk to people that are really smart and know things. And when they never give me enough time with John, my crew, my staff will give me like 4 minutes with John, and I could ask him questions for the whole 2 hours because he knows so much, and it's such a thrill to have him on my show. So this is an extra thrill to have him ask me questions about a topic he knows better than I, which is the FBI.
Let's see if you still feel that way after the questions. First of all, you have the right to remain silent. Second of all, this is going to be very short if we do it that way. So, first of all, I loved this book. My life flashed before my eyes, and there were just, you can't put it down when you're on the battlefield. I mean, it's an amazing recounting of a story. But it's not a normal story, even in the genre of terrorism and, manhunt and all that, because when I picked it up, and, no spoilers, this is only from the first page, right? It said the guy approached the security guy and he said, "I'm Al-Qaeda, I killed Americans, I killed soldiers, I'm a terrorist." And then it's like, all right, so he's under arrest. I'm like, this is the world's shortest book. But that's not the way it goes. Most of the books that we know, it starts with a terrible terrorist attack, and then there's the hunt for who did it, how do we know, who's behind it. This was inverted, which is really unusual. So tell me about two things. One, briefly, how did you find this story? I knew the story because it came out of the JTTF, and I used to run half of that. But it wasn't a story that got a lot of tell. And two, once you found it, how did you know that after the crime is solved at the beginning, that the big mystery was still to come? Because it wasn't whodunit, it was, where was it? Who did it happen to? How do we find them?
Yeah, it's exactly the opposite of a whodunit. It is, here's the bad guy, find out what he did, and prove it. And it came to me completely by happenstance, which is I was hosting my son's 13th birthday party 3 years ago this month. And because it was a paintball party, it was out in the boonies in Virginia, an hour plus outside DC. So I had pizza and drinks there for the grown-ups too, so they could just stick around and enjoy a nice fall day while the kids were beating each other up in the forest, and we could just hang out. And one of the dads came up to me, and he said he knew somebody from my previous book about Afghanistan, The Outpost. And I said, yeah, that was a really tough story to write because the military keeps horrible records, and in addition to that, they don't share them. And he said, tell me about it. And he proceeds to tell me basically this story, starting with him answering the phone in Brooklyn at the Eastern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. He's told, I just got the craziest call. The FBI is on the other line. I just got the craziest call. The Italians have picked up an Al-Qaeda operative named Spin Ghoul. Have you heard of him? And Dave Bitcower, the dad that I was talking to, they had heard of him. And so the Americans go over to Italy, hear his confession in a court, and the Italians are like, great, take him. We don't want him. He hasn't done anything to us. He's confessed to killing Americans in an ambush in Afghanistan and trying to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria. He's a upper to mid-level Al-Qaeda operative, but he's interacted with a number of high-level Al-Qaeda. This is 2011. And the Italians don't want him, and the Americans, because Obama is president, can't just take him and send him to Gitmo. They have to prove a case, and Obama was really hell-bent on prosecuting terrorists in criminal court. And the military commissions were not working. By the way, they're still not really working. And so there is this race to prove the case against Spin Ghoul, figure out who he ambushed, when he ambushed them, who he killed. Is there any evidence to back up this claim that he tried to blow up the embassy in Nigeria? Before the Italians get fed up and put him in a refugee camp from which he'll escape easily and then carry out his life's mission, which is to kill as many Americans as possible. And so Dave Bitcower, who is the assistant U.S. attorney who's one of the stars of the book and also the dad at this birthday party, is telling me this story. And it's all about the sleuthing, really. And then we found this, and then we found that, and then we found this person, and then we found that person. And it's all the stuff that I love from police procedurals, from CSI and Cold Case and Law and Order, how they prove the case. And when he was done with the story, I said, has anybody written this before? And he said, there was some coverage of the trial, but nothing about how we got all that evidence. And I thought, well, that's just the best story I've ever heard at any party ever. And I took him and his partner, the other assistant U.S. attorney, Shreve, Ariel. I took them out to lunch the next week, and this is the case of their career.
How long was lunch?
Like a couple hours. Couple hours.
Not that long. Okay.
No, not that long. And I didn't need to booze them up either. You know what I mean? They were. It wasn't like the last book I wrote where you get people a little liquored up so they tell you their secrets. These guys were happy to tell this story. And
why I haven't gotten a story since Elaine's closed.
And then the more I learned, the more, and then I just keep meeting these interesting people, and then I tell the story of the soldiers and all that, and it ended up, I'm pretty proud of it.
Well, so let's talk about telling the story of, this book has so many heroes in it. Let's start with the unlikely ones, the ones that don't appear in the battle scenes, but turn out to be these amazing investigators.
Yeah, so if this were fiction, and I described, and then there are two Muslim FBI agents, both women, and the lead assistant U.S. attorney, one is a wiry, intense Jew from Manhattan, the other one is this genial Virginian, like if I did all, and one of the FBI agents is this Caribbean immigrant, the people in the studio would be like, it's a little much.
Yeah.
But it's real. I mean, and you know this from serving in the FBI, but the American mosaic of law enforcement is just every race, religion, creed. I mean, it is truly amazing. And they're all patriots. They're all inspired to law enforcement for their own reasons, but they all take it incredibly, at least the ones I met who are, good people, they all take it incredibly seriously. They all have their own motivations. But it was really inspiring. And the book was written to be a good story. That's why I wrote it, and I tried to write it as using lessons I'd learned writing fiction. But it ended up being, in a way, kind of like a love letter to these people who keep us safe, who are unheralded, assistant U.S. attorneys, FBI agents that nobody knows the names of, et cetera. It's a love letter to a functioning government, a functioning Justice Department, a functioning FBI. A forlorn love letter, perhaps.
That's more like a history story, then.
Right, love lost. But it really made me very hopeful about the country in a lot of ways, because these were people that are very idealistic, very, I don't know their politics at all, not one of them. And they're all very carefully not to talk about it, even in private. But they are, to a person, completely dedicated to the American ideals of what our justice system is supposed to stand for. And it was really just a pleasure to meet so many of them.
And this is the crew from the JTTF. So the JTTF is the Joint Terrorism Task Force, formed in New York City in 1980. When I had it, we had 120 cops, New York City cops, on the FBI task force. And then they had a couple of hundred FBI agents, but then you have these odd agents from, DHS and Army CID. Your guy, LaCroix?
Oh, yeah, Bert Lacroix.
Oh,
Bert
forgive me.
Lacroix. How to pronounce his name is actually a question in the book, because the fingerprint analyst at Quantico didn't know how to pronounce it. I actually had to ask him, and I think I probably had to ask him like three or four separate different times. Bert Lacroix, yeah, from the Caribbean, American by choice.
Yes.
Is how we describe him.
But you have this amazing collective of people from all these agencies that are focused on one thing, which is preventing terrorism and bringing people to justice who commit it. And you meet these people in the book, but the battle scenes where Spin Ghoul actually launched his attack on these soldiers, machine guns, grenades, everything he could throw at them, and in the name of Al-Qaeda, which is one of those things they had to establish, they are so vivid that you think that somebody watched a videotape of the whole thing and then wrote it second by second. How does one accomplish what you did there?
Thank you. That's a high compliment. It is the most difficult thing journalistically to do, for me, is to write those, because first of all, you are asking service members, tell me about the worst day of your life. I know you don't know me and I'm just a voice on the phone, but tell me about the worst day in your life. And also, just as a matter of journalism, they're very difficult and very complicated to figure out what happened, and you have so many different points of view. And what I did basically was just talk to as many of them as I could, and come up with the narrative that I came up with. Then I compared. I was lucky enough that one of the great assistant U.S. attorneys, a woman prosecutor named Melody Wells, in her summation in the trial of Spin Ghoul, which took place in Brooklyn in 2018, she had done the same thing. So after I did mine, I compared it to hers, and they were pretty much exactly the same, but I felt better that there was, because again, the Army doesn't have, you would think there's an ambush, it's a horrible thing, 4 soldiers are seriously wounded, 2 service members are killed. Theoretically, you would think, maybe naively, I'm sure somebody went in there and then wrote some sort of definitive report about what happened. But they don't have the time or the manpower to do that. And so there isn't that. And so, but I just had to recreate it. And then after I wrote it, I sent it to the soldiers that I'd interviewed and asked them, is this accurate? Is this what happened? And some of them would say, offer some notes here and there. Some of them wouldn't read it because they don't want to read it. They don't want to relive it. Even the publication of the book, I think, is difficult for some people. Not that they're not happy that the story's out there, but it just reminds them of things. One of the soldiers in the book is having a mental health episode right now. He's in a hospital right now. And I think the book probably didn't help, even though he's a hero in it. Like just all the old memories coming back. But and the prosecutors had the same problem I did, except they were doing it to bring the story to light so they could prosecute Spin Ghoul, and I did it so I could write the book and bring attention to them and this prosecution. But which is also like, it's not fun to ask these soldiers about this. And some of them, and it's relayed in the book, some of the soldiers were quite hostile to the investigators. There's this one guy who was so seriously wounded. Not only did he not cooperate with me, he didn't cooperate with the prosecutors. The prosecutors ultimately tracked him down in rural Arizona. This is in the book. And the 2 FBI agents say, when they're all leaving, the 2 FBI agents say, well, you can't call him, even though he was one of the first people seriously wounded by Spin Ghoul. You can't call him. It would destroy him on the stand. And the assistant U.S. attorneys can't make that promise because at the end of the day, their job is to lock Spin Ghoul up for the rest of his life. They don't ultimately call him, but they can't make that promise.
So tell us about Spin Ghoul, and then tell us about one of the soldiers he killed. I mean, these are two people that in a million years would have never met, except for this circumstance. And they're both such interesting characters, the villain and the victim.
So Spin Ghoul, his parents were from Niger. They made pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia and then just never left. And they were undocumented immigrants basically in Saudi Arabia and basically living a life of indentured servitude. And if you think there's bad racism in the United States, you should check out what the racism's like in Saudi Arabia. And it's horrible and repressive. And Spin Ghoul, I mean, that's not his real name, obviously. That was his battle name, but I'll just call him that for simplicity. Spin Ghoul was raised in Saudi Arabia, not a tremendous amount of education. And his heroes in the 1990s were the same way that in the United States, people's heroes might be actors or baseball players or basketball players. His heroes were jihadists. And it's not as crazy as you might think, because the jihadists were the heroes of the war in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. So these were people that the United States was arming, the Mujahideen. And they were the people that had been fighting Putin's oppressive army in Chechnya. So these jihadists might even be people that would be heralded in the United States in the 90s for what they were doing. But those were his heroes, and then in the late 90s, he wanted to be a jihadist, and he would talk about it with friends, and then somebody heard him, somebody who worked in the Saudi government, who was a Mujahideen himself, and he got enlisted. He was basically, drafted to join. And his passport and visa were forged, and he ended up in Pakistan and then Afghanistan, and he was at the Al Farouk training camp. This is before 9/11. And probably not unlike a lot of disaffected young men in this country who end up extremists of one kind or another. It was an adventure and something to do and companionship. I think somewhere along the line he became a real religious zealot, but where the zealotry ends and insanity begins, I don't know. So that's who he was. The two men who were killed, I'll just tell you the story of Jared Dennis, because I know more about him.
I mean, in the book, we meet him as a boy.
Yeah, he was a class clown, Jared Dennis from Antlers, Oklahoma, and his dad was a Vietnam veteran. He was Native American, and he was, again, a young man adrift, kind of a pothead and a goof, and he probably would have failed out of high school and ended up, up to no good. But he was drafted by the U.S. military. He signed an intention form when he was still in high school, like 17 years old. Joined the military, and again, this is before 9/11, so like a lot of young men, he joined the military to save his life and get some discipline and get some order. And it was a rocky start. He failed a drug test while in the Army, but this is 2002, and they didn't really have as many soldiers as they needed to go fight in Afghanistan. And
his commander went to bat for him.
His commander went to bat for him.
Which says something.
Yeah, well, he liked him, and he thought a couple things. One, he thought he could turn this guy into a soldier, and two, he thought nobody is more loyal than somebody that you've saved from a situation like that. And it was true. And Jared Dennis became a great soldier, private, and a sweet kid. He would write home and call home and talk about how the Afghans weren't so different from the rural people of Oklahoma, that they, instead of branding their livestock, they would dye the livestock. And he got a kick out of the fact that there were like pink chickens and yellow chickens and purple chickens, because that's how people would distinguish who was theirs. And one of the FBI agents, Rashana Muhammad, this great character, Muslim black woman from Baltimore, who ended up in the FBI, she would keep a picture of a chicken that was dyed pink on her desk while they were investigating this case, to remind her of this sweet boy, Jared Dennis, that was killed in Afghanistan in April 2003. And I have to say, like, the participation of the Dennis family is something else that I was really lucky. I'm lucky that I wrote The Outpost, because that meant that even though I work for the liberal media, I was cool. Like, they knew I would cover their story well, that I'd written this other book about Afghanistan. It had been turned into a movie that soldiers respected. And so I was okay. And they trusted me, the Dennis family. And Ray Lozano, who was also killed that day, an airman, his family trusted me too. But there just weren't as many people to tell me stories about him. His parents had both passed away. And
well, you get to learn a lot about, if not his life story, who he is and what kind of man he is in those battle scenes, because, you know, as much as people are getting torn up in these scenes, they keep coming back into the fight. I mean, yeah. Their true profiles and courage. But it brings me to a question which I guess people have to be wondering out here, which is, okay, we show up, we're the U.S. Army, we're fighting Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Haqqani network, they shoot at us, we shoot at them. How does that become terrorism? How do you drag a guy into a courtroom and say, we were at war with you, you were at war with us, but we caught you, and now you're on trial in Brooklyn? The book goes to a lot of work to explain why this is different.
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, even members of Jared Dennis's own family, when the prosecutors came and told them what the case was going to be like and everything, I think it was his sister, Jillian Dennis, said, how is this even illegal?
It's called war.
Yeah, and the defense and Spin Ghoul had 3 excellent defense attorneys from here in New York. Tried to make that argument. They had a JAG, a Judge Advocate General, military lawyer who was there, Colonel Fract, to make the argument that Spin Ghoul, that maybe the attempt to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria was against the law, but what Spin Ghoul was doing adhered to the laws of war. He wasn't targeting civilians. He was going after U.S. service members. They were in a clear battle zone, in a clear war zone, and he was using weapons that are permissible in war. He wasn't using chemical weapons. He wasn't using, any sort of banned weapon. He wasn't using mines, which are banned in some places. He was, adhering to the laws of war. And the judge has to decide whether or not to let that argument in a court of law or not. But yeah, I mean, and one of the arguments Fract, the JAG, makes is, so the United States is saying, we can go anywhere in the world and kill anybody we want if they're a terrorist with Al-Qaeda, but if they return fire, we get to arrest them.
Works for me.
So that was the argument. But remember, the prosecution of Spin Ghoul was a deviation from how things had been done. And in fact, I was interviewed earlier today by the conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt, who, said that I wrote the book, down the middle. I'm not taking a position one way or the other. But he thinks the book shows that the Obama way of doing things is silly and unnecessary, and Spin Ghoul should have just been sent to Guantanamo and tried by a military court or whatever. Who cares? Because he was guilty. And I'm glad he thinks I wrote the book that way, because that's how I tried to write the book. It's not a polemic. It's just a reported story. But one of the things I think, and this is not in the book, this is just kind of something I've reflected on, is that if Spin Ghoul had been picked up during the Bush years and sent to Gitmo, I think ultimately he probably would have been freed, because after a decade, somebody would have said, all we have on this guy is his confession, because all the sleuthing wouldn't have happened. The military is not going to send agents to investigate to Nigeria and everything to investigate. That's just not how the military commissions are done. So he ultimately probably would have just been freed. I think there are only 15 detainees at Gitmo left now. So they've mostly been let go. And I think Spin Ghoul would have been overjoyed, and then he would have tried to kill as many Americans as he could. And so I think the Obama way of doing things, at least in this instance, ended up that we were safer because Spin Ghoul, this doesn't ruin the book, I don't think, is locked away in a supermax for the rest of his life. What if I was like, Spin Ghoul is here right now? Thank you.
We're going to bring a third chair to the stage now. So, I mean, that becomes the second or third subplot that's running through this book, which is, what are we doing here? You know, we have these people in Gitmo, and next year it will be 25 years since 9/11. They are still having hearings as to whether Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has to shave his beard for appearing in a trial or not. But 25 years later, he has seen the inside of a courtroom, a military commission courtroom, 1,000,000 times, but he has never seen day one of a trial. Had that trial taken place in New York City in the Southern District, it would have taken 1.5 years to prepare, and it would have been a complicated case, and it would have taken, you know, 1.5 months to put that trial on. But he would be doing life, or he would be doing death, but he would be done.
Yeah. That's one of and this wasn't something that I set out to do, but the history of the war on terror weaves its way through the book because of other cases that are relevant, other bad guys that Spin Ghoul met along the way and what happened to them.
I mean, the big shadow in the story is they brought one other guy to trial in New York, and he got acquitted of every charge but one. And the judge said, well, on that one charge, I sentenced you to 150 years. But a long sentence for what the charge was. But the risk with Spin Ghoul is, what happens if we take him to trial and he walks out of a courtroom?
Yeah, right. So Ahmed Galani.
And there was no guarantee.
None. Ahmed Galani is the only detainee from Gitmo tried in a criminal court. He's the only one. And the fact he's the only one is, I think it was 2010, and he was tried for his involvement in the 1998 embassy bombings in Tanzania and Kenya. And he was, as John notes, acquitted of 284 of 285 charges. And the reason he was acquitted is because the main witness against him was a guy whose name the U.S. only learned because of enhanced interrogation by the CIA of Galani in a black site. So the judge ultimately threw out that witness. So the prosecutors under Preet Bharara, the U.S. attorney then, didn't really have much. And he could have walked. I gotta believe the jury knew what was going on and acquitted and convicted him of that one charge because they didn't want the guy walking. But in any case, that sent such a shockwave of fear among Democratic office holders, Republican office holders, people in the national security community, because Obama wanted to try all of the 9/11 defendants who could be tried, that there was, you know, usable evidence. Some of the guys, the 15 that are still there, these are bad guys that the evidence was so tainted by torture or enhanced interrogation, they could never be successfully tried because none of the evidence would be usable. So Obama made the decision, okay, well, these guys are just going to stay here forever, in Gitmo forever. But that Galani decision, which I don't even remember, but I'm sure you do.
Oh, yeah.
Was so terrifying to people that all the plans to prosecute Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other 9/11 plotters were basically just thrown out. Obama still wanted to do it, but the Senate blocked it by law. In the defense bill, they put a provision in there saying you are not allowed to bring any foreign terrorists to the United States for criminal prosecution. And you know, Obama begged for a waiver, and they gave him a waiver. Okay, fine, if you sign a waiver, you can. And Spin Ghoul is the guy that got the waiver, the only one. And he is, to this day, the only foreign terrorist tried in a U.S. criminal court for killing service members abroad, although Trump is going to try to do the second. This guy named Jafar, who was part of the Abbey Gate plot in Afghanistan in 2021, Trump announced during his address to Congress earlier this year that they're bringing Jafar. He's going to be tried in the Eastern District of Virginia, if they're not too busy prosecuting all of Trump's political enemies. and Jafar will be the second if he's prosecuted. And it's so interesting that during the Obama era, there was such fear. People were so, I remember feeling it myself. But there was such fear, as if you would bring in Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and he would be endowed with Thanos-like powers, and he'd be able to burst out of prison and kill people just by laser shooting out of his fingers. That people were still terrorized 10 years after 9/11. And this wasn't just Republicans blocking it. It was Chuck Schumer was blocking it. Nobody wanted these people coming to the United States by the time the rubber was actually set to hit the road. And that's why they're still all there. So, I mean, it is amazing that Trump announced this and there wasn't one word of protest from anybody. And Jafar's just sitting in this, jail in Alexandria. And, he's never, he's not going to escape. He's not going to hurt us.
No, and it's going to be another great experiment about not over-engineering these things with military commissions and, bases in Gitmo. Should bring them to court. They have the evidence. Before we switch to questions from the audience in a couple of minutes, this is a you question, a process question, which is, I'm married, I have 2 kids. They take up time because you want to be a good, dad, but I have this high-pressure job, not as high pressure as yours. I don't have to produce an entire broadcast every day and go through all the research. I find a lot of things piling up, not getting done. You have done all this while just cranking out like 4 books, a couple of novels, a couple of true stories. How is that possible? I mean, there are authors who write books, and there are people who are anchormen of shows, but you're prolific and scary. So you have like a ghostwriter, and you don't want to talk about it, and and now we're going to bring somebody from the back of the room. No, but I mean, it's amazing that you can do this. Is it therapeutic? Is it hellish? What is it?
So obviously, I'm a little nuts. I mean,
stipulated.
Yes, and I have friends here from college who I'm sure could tell you that I was nuts in college too. David Ignatius, who's a Washington Post columnist who has also written lots of books, interviewed me in D.C. for this book, and he said, because I think he's wired similarly, and he said his hobby is work, and I think that rang really true for me. Like I always want to have a project that I'm working on, and this one kind of just found me, and I just thought it was interesting. The way I write is very helpful for getting this kind of thing done, which is just basically 2 rules, which is 1, write every day for at least 15 minutes a day, every day. So, my wife takes the kids to school at 7:40.
It's 15 minutes?
15, at least 15.
Okay, what's your average?
An hour.
Okay.
But it can be 15. It can be 15. And I find the early morning, between 7 and 10 to be really fruitful time.
I've never found the early morning.
And then the other thing is the other thing I find helpful is when it comes to writing is focusing on the structure first. And
so do you map out the book?
Yeah, map out the book. And so it's going to start here, and then and that is incredibly helpful. You can always change it while you're doing it, but that's really helpful because it gives you like a to-do list. Okay, what am I doing today? Chapter 5 is about this, etc. Now, I had one of the reasons I wrote this with Simon & Schuster with the imprint Atria is because there's this great editor there who's relatively young. I think he's under 40, so that's to me.
I have ties older than this guy.
Exactly.
I met him in the green room.
I think my tie is older than him.
He said your copy came in perfect every time. He
No.
just read it and never had to touch a single thing.
No, that's why I picked him, is because I didn't want that. Because he's the kind of...
Because he didn't say that.
Yeah, no, but I mean that there are editors like that out there, and Sean is exactly what I need, which is, I'm sorry to say that chapter 6 reads way too much like chapter 3, and you need to do a complete rewrite. And here's my idea. What do you think? And, you know, after the expletives, not directed at him, but in my head, you know, I take the note. And so that was helpful because it also just it created another set of eyes for the structure.
Okay, so fiction versus fact. Which is more fun to write? Which is easier to write? Which is harder to write?
Nonfiction is a lot easier to write. These are the questions?
Thanks.
That was an assassin.
The assassin would have worn quieter shoes.
Yeah, no, seriously. Not mine. But he didn't even hear her. Nonfiction is easier to write, I think. I think fiction is tougher to write. Fiction is more fun to write, without question, because fiction, especially because I write nonfiction about, you know, terrorism and war, or the end of a democracy or whatever. So fiction is more fun, but also more difficult. For me personally. Have you ever tried fiction? I bet you have amazing stories that you couldn't write as nonfiction because they're classified, but...
I was just going to actually write them as true, but I had to wait till after all my friends were dead. So, fiction is harder because you have to make up the story?
Yeah, because you have to make it all up, whereas nonfiction, like, I came across the story of Spin Ghoul in 2022.
And the story was done already.
He's done, yeah. I mean, like, and when Bitcower told me the story...
But fiction, you don't have to research. I mean, when I wrote a book, I stopped typing every 3 seconds to say, okay, what date was that? Where's that folder? What was that exact quote? Can I cut and paste it from some other document? I mean, it was halting.
Yeah, and can I tell you, one of the things I did for the last 2 books, this book and Original Sin, is both of those books we hired fact checkers for, which I'd never done before. Obviously not for the 3 novels, although I could have used them too because they're historical fiction, but I'd never done it before, and those people are just a different breed, and they're fantastic, but they really save you from yourself.
So, questions from the audience. This is a modern book on terrorism at a modern time. What are the concerns terrorists and AI? I mean, we just watch what we see in the newsroom. We get home and we see what our kids are doing, at least half of it. And that's a powerful tool. That's a kind of an equalizer.
I don't know how many people saw the movie, oh God, what is it called? I think it was an HBO movie or a Netflix movie. It was by the guy that did Veep. It's like Matterhorn, but it's not called Matterhorn. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, it's about the perils of AI. It's about a bunch of tech bros vacationing together.
Oh yeah, I saw
in Park City. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I forget what it's called, but it's like Matterhorn, but it's not called Matterhorn. Anyway,
great cast.
But it was a really good movie. And the only reason I bring it up is because one of the subplots going on, not there, but in the real world, is there is this AI, and there's this incredible AI technology that has just been released into the world, and it is being completely abused.
To spin up wars and
so literally
battles.
To start wars and vigilante mobs and all the rest, because it's so good, people can't tell the difference between real and wrong, and like in parts of the world where, I mean, it's wreaking havoc everywhere, but in places that are even less technological than the United States, it's causing wars.
I mean, it's a really interesting question, whoever sent it up, because, you know, in the less imaginative, more simplistic way, just the power of the tool, we are looking at terrorist organizations' recruitment, where now they're recruiting in scores of languages that they didn't have the language skills before, simply by feeding the script of the video into the translator and, you know, it coming out the other side, and they're marketing, you know, terrorism globally. Another question from the audience. There are debates that 9/11 could have been avoided. Agree, disagree? You've seen some of the new information and reporting that's been coming out.
I mean, it was an intelligence failure, but intelligence is, you know, it's so easy to look back at and 2020 hindsight it. Yes, of course, theoretically it could have been prevented, but it's not as simple as pointing to that one presidential daily brief that Bush had bin Laden determined to attack within the United States, because first of all, that's just one presidential daily brief of dozens, hundreds, however many that didn't come true. And also, it's not like it said, on 9/11, you know, this is going to happen. So yes, of course, it could have been prevented, but that requires a kind of hindsight that I don't think is fair to say. I will say this, I do want to say this. One of the characters in this book, who's a real person that John knows, that I've never met, talked to, communicated with at all, because he would not cooperate with the book, because he doesn't talk to reporters, which is, you know, what FBI agents and officials are supposed to do. But he really wouldn't, but I only tell you all that because I'm about to praise him, and I don't want you to think I'm rewarding him for having done something for me. He has done nothing for me, and I'm not happy about it. But his name is George Toscas, Toscas, and he had been at the Department of Justice since 1993, and he was the one that the assistant U.S. attorneys and U.S. attorneys had to bring the case to if they wanted the Justice Department to do something that required any risk at all. Toscas was the one you had to get it through. Not the Attorney General, Eric Holder, not the President, Barack Obama. It was Toscas. Toscas, again, you know, worked under multiple administrations. He was the one that made sure the cases were tight, that the indictments, the extradition, everything, that every T was crossed and every I was dotted. He had been burned before as a prosecutor during the first Bush term. He was trying to prosecute some Hutus who killed Westerners in Rwanda and hacked a bunch of Westerners to death, including 2 from Oregon. And it turned out that during the trial, the judge learned that their confessions had been acquired by Rwandan authorities who were police from the rival Tutsi clan, and that it was unfair duress, and threw out their confessions, and those Hutu murderers went to Australia, where I guess even today they're free. And that case weighed on Toscas's mind, I know from people he talked to, but not from him himself. And he was the kind of guy who was like, that will never happen again under my watch. That will never happen again. Toscas, earlier this year, was sidelined at the Justice Department, taken out of the National Security Division, because he had signed off on the Mar-a-Lago classified documents warrant against Donald Trump. And if he has not done his final day at the Justice Department, it's coming any moment. And that really scares me. And it's not the only instance of its kind. The guy, I told you about Jafar, behind the Abbey Gate prosecution at the Eastern District of Virginia. The guy that was prosecuting that case, a guy named Michael Ben-Ari, was fired last Wednesday because some MAGA person on Twitter said something like he probably opposed the James Comey indictment. I mean, no evidence, just made it up. But it was some MAGA person of some note in that world, and so Michael Ben-Ari was fired. And Michael Ben-Ari put a letter on his door, like Martin Luther, saying that his firing hurts the case against Jafar, and that the current Justice Department leadership is more focused on going after Trump's political enemies than they are in protecting the American people. That stuff terrifies me. So when people are talking about, could 9/11 have been prevented, I don't know. Certainly the Bush administration came in not focused on terrorism particularly, but Clinton hadn't been focused on it either. It was a more innocent time before 9/11. We kind of thought it would never happen. But this is happening right now, and it scares me, and it really, really concerns me. And again, I don't know the politics of any of these people. None of them have talked to me. None of them have cooperated with the press as far as I know. But I know they're excellent from their colleagues or people who used to work with them, and that's happening right now.
Which feeds perfectly into the next question, which you've basically teed up. How is the United States doing in the war on terror?
It's interesting because we have arrived at almost like a kind of place of consensus in terms of how we prosecute the war on terror, which is we like to do as much of it as possible abroad, and we like our allies who are bad guys to handle it, and we don't, and we look the other way, whether it's the dictator al-Sisi in Egypt or any other dictator in that region. Not a lot of democracy in that part of the world. Not sure if you've noticed, and we try to kill as many of them over there as possible, and we don't talk a lot about the fact that we deploy people to Somalia. You know, I think Nikki Haley's husband was deployed to the Horn of Africa maybe during her presidential run. Like, we have people in harm's way, but we don't broadcast it that much. We are kind of like in a world in terms of how we deal with it here in the United States that is neither Bush doctrine nor Obama doctrine, but kind of like this murky middle ground. I'm happy to hear that Trump is going to try to pursue charges against Jafar because I do think that's effective. But I'm not confident that the people who are in charge of keeping us safe are focused primarily on keeping us safe as opposed to other things like vengeance. And look, if Letitia James and James Comey broke the law, whatever, that'll be up for a court, but I'm not scared of what Letitia James is going to do to me. I am scared of what Jafar is going to do to me, you know?
Yeah. No, and I mean, you think of Jafar, you think of Spin Ghoul, you think of Najibullah Zazi, who, you know, your book kind of starts out with the story of men who traveled from Al-Qaeda camps, you know, to New York to set off multiple bombs in the subway. I was in the FBI at the time that case was unfolding, and it was an amazing feat of taking the thinnest thread of intelligence and turning it into a lead that stopped that attack with a couple of adventures along the way. But
Can I just say something about Zazi? So I don't know how many of you remember this. This is 2009?
Yeah.
Early Obama. And Zazi was this Coloradan who had trained in a terrorist training camp and come back, and he and two others were going to blow up the subways in Manhattan. And I mean, it is an incredible story that I only just briefly touch on in the book because Dave Bittkower worked on the case. But it was incredible sleuthing that they figured out what he was going to do, who he was, followed him as he drove from Colorado to New York. But we also got lucky because Zazi, there was some sort of misunderstanding, and he was able, even though everybody was looking for him, in law enforcement, and this must have been a horrible week for you, but he was able to cross the George Washington Bridge with a container of explosives, and the reason that didn't happen is because Zazi panicked and came back to Colorado. But like that could have ended much differently.
Yeah, no, it could have, and it was a case full of great things that made it come together and really difficult lessons about trying to manage risk with controlling features, which you don't always control. Two quick things. You know so much about Spin Ghoul. How would you characterize the parallels between what radicalized him, which you described in detail here, and today's terrorists?
Well, today's terrorists, Al-Qaeda terrorists, or today's terrorists like right-wing terrorists, left-wing terrorists, like any terrorists? Well, they all tend to be men. They all tend to be young men. They're not necessarily outcasts. They tend to be vaguely disaffected, but not, not criminals necessarily. I think that,
Is one of the differences that he was found by a person who did the intimate radicalization of up close and personal, as opposed to he watched a propaganda video and then decided I'm going to rewrite my life story with a different ending?
There are these delusions of grandeur that are in place. I'm thinking about the guy who killed Charlie Kirk.
And Spin Ghoul had his delusions of
Yeah,
grandeur.
he thought he was going to be an Al-Qaeda hero. And one of the reasons he confessed is because he was so proud of what he had done. There's a story that I did not get to include in the book because Sean thought it was too glib and it was too tough to find a place for it. And I don't disagree.
Okay.
Sean. I'm not.
Sean's under the bus
I'm
now.
not criticizing Sean.
But you had a really good run a few minutes ago.
It's a good it's a good chat topic. So it's okay that it's not in the book. But Bitcower.
You're getting bonus material here.
Bitcower went to Yale, and Bitcower, when he was at, he wrote for the Yale Daily News, and he got to interview a guy named Ron Darling, who people in this crowd might be familiar with. Ron Darling was a pitcher for the Mets, and that was the last time the Mets won the World Series. I think he was a pitcher for them, 1986. Sorry about the Yankees and the Mets, by the way, everybody. But anyway.
He's a Philadelphia guy, so you know.
So Ron Darling, so when Bitcower went to interview Ron Darling, when Bitcower was a student, Ron Darling was already like a huge deal, won a World Series, et cetera. Bitcower wanted to ask him about a no-hitter that he pitched against, the University of Texas? And to Bitcower's delight and surprise, Ron Darling, even though he was this big World Series winning pitcher, Major League Baseball player, remembered every single detail about the no-hitter he pitched when he was a college student. And in a weird, twisted way, Spin Ghoul, telling the court about his terrorism, and when he ambushed Americans, and then when he tried to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria, reminded Bitcower of Ron Darling, telling his stories of success, of the greatest days of his life. So it doesn't really answer your question, but the idea, well, in a way it does, because it's about...
No, but it does. It feeds into... I want to go from loser to lion.
Yeah. Look at me. Look at what I achieved.
Yes.
Look at what I did, and that was Spin Ghoul. And I think a lot of these terrorists, whether they're left-wing terrorists like Charlie Kirk's assassin or right-wing terrorists like, whatever, doesn't fill in the blank. I think they feel that way, and this is. I don't know what we're doing wrong as a society, not just America, but the world, that this is happening, that people think that violence is an answer, but it does feel like it's happening more and more. Like it feels like there's more of an appeal for that, and that's disturbing.
No, we're coming out of a generation where they grew up living out loud on social media, getting credit and prizes for everything. It's a global phenomenon in many ways, but you take Spin Ghoul, you take Zazi, you take any of these people, but you can measure them against Luigi Mangione, who, when he's caught, he has the manifesto with the murder weapon in the bag. It's kind of like, at some point, I have set this up, so I'm going to get some kind of credit for this. I don't know at what point, but otherwise he would have gotten rid of those things. Or the killer of Charlie Kirk, who is texting his chat group about, what he did and so on and so forth. There is, there's this amateur profile stuff about, I think he really wanted to get caught. I don't think any of them want to get caught. I think all of them want to get credit.
Yeah, I think they want to get famous. They don't want to be in prison, but they all want to get famous.
That's right. Well, and talking about what they did, let's talk about what you did. Race Against Terror, Jake Tapper. It's for sale in the lobby. Incredible book. You won't be able to put it down.
My thanks to John Miller and the 90 Seconds GY. Thank you.